The sound of tires screeched across the Lagos Expressway, headlights cutting through the thick night fog, and then came the crash that would change everything. Broken glass sprayed like diamonds across the wet asphalt. In the mangled wreckage, a young billionaire named Ethan Cole, only 31 years old, sat with blood dripping down his forehead, his body limp against the seat. His eyes fluttered as strangers screamed, rushing toward the car. Within hours, news broke. Ethan Cole, the youngest billionaire in Lagos, involved in a deadly crash. Doctors say he may never walk again. Phones buzzed. Reporters gathered. And somewhere across the city, his fiancée Vanessa Brooks whispered words that weren't of sorrow but of triumph. She thought she had just won a fortune. But Ethan was about to teach her a lesson she could never forget. Before we dive into this shocking story, pause for a second. Smash that subscribe button to support our growth and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Drop your city, I might give you a shout out in the next episode. Now let's get back to Ethan's story. 3 months earlier, Ethan was a man the world envied. Tall, handsome, and always dressed in sharp navy suits that made him look like success stitched into fabric, he was the kind of billionaire people whispered about in awe. His businesses stretched from oil to tech startups. His face appeared on magazine covers beside phrases like, the golden boy of Lagos, and the billionaire who can't lose. Yet behind the mansion walls, his life wasn't as perfect as people thought. He had a fiancée, Vanessa, a beautiful 29-year-old woman with striking green eyes and long black hair that fell in smooth waves. To the world, she was his perfect match. But Ethan had begun to sense something dark underneath her charming smile. It started with whispers he overheard late at night when she thought he was asleep. Conversations with her brother about shares, about inheritance, about life insurance. If anything happens to him, we're set for life, she once said, her voice too calm for comfort. Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his chest tightening. That was the first crack in his trust. The second came when his private investigator sent him photos. Vanessa meeting with lawyers, Vanessa slipping envelopes into the hands of strangers in the parking lot of a hotel. The woman he had promised to marry was building a plan behind his back, a plan that smelled like betrayal. And then fate delivered the crash. Ethan was rushed to the hospital. The diagnosis came swift and sharp, paralysis from the waist down. To the world, it was a tragedy. To Vanessa, it was opportunity. She began to visit the hospital with flowers, crocodile tears streaming down her cheeks, while in private she snapped at the nurses and complained about how slow the inheritance process would be. Ethan, lying motionless on the bed, heard everything. Every cruel word. Every greedy sigh. That's when he made a decision that shocked even his closest advisors. He would not reveal the truth. Because the truth was, the doctors had told him there was hope. With therapy and time he could recover. But instead of announcing it, he decided to pretend. Pretend to be completely paralyzed. Pretend to be helpless. Pretend to be broken. He wanted to see what Vanessa would do when she believed he could never walk again. Days blurred into weeks. Vanessa's mask began to slip more and more. At the same time, someone unexpected entered Ethan's life. Her name was Lily Adams, a 24-year-old maid from a humble family in Ibadan. She was hired to clean the mansion after Ethan returned home in a wheelchair. Lily was nothing like Vanessa. Where Vanessa complained about the scent of hospital rooms, Lily hummed softly as she changed sheets. Where Vanessa rolled her eyes at pushing Ethan's wheelchair, Lily knelt down, looked into his eyes and asked, "Are you comfortable, sir?" She wore simple uniforms, her hair tied in neat braids, and she often smelled faintly of soap and fresh air. She was invisible to most people in the mansion, but not to Ethan. Not anymore. The more Ethan watched, the more the contrast tore at him. One afternoon, Vanessa stormed into his study, her red dress flowing like fire, her lips painted a sharp scarlet. She slammed her bag on the desk. "Ethan, we need to talk about the will," she snapped. "You can't just sit here doing nothing. People are asking questions. What happens to your empire if you," she paused dramatically, "if you don't make it?" Ethan swallowed hard, feigning weakness, murmuring only, "Later, Vanessa. I'm tired." Her eyes hardened. "You're always tired now. Maybe you're not the man I thought you were." She turned and stormed out, not noticing Lily standing by the door holding a tray of tea. Lily lowered her eyes, but Ethan caught the flicker of pity, and something else, cross her face. That night, unable to sleep, Ethan asked Lily to stay in the room while he stared out the window. The city lights blinked like stars on the ground. "Do you believe people can change?" he asked suddenly. Lily looked startled but then nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. Sometimes it takes pain to show who someone really is. And sometimes it takes kindness to heal what's broken." Her words hit him harder than any business deal ever had. He studied her, the way her voice carried warmth, the way her eyes shone with honesty. And for the first time since the crash, Ethan felt hope flicker inside him. But hope came with danger. Because Vanessa was growing impatient. And greed has no patience. One evening, Ethan pretended to nap in his wheelchair when he overheard her on the phone. "No, listen," she hissed, her voice sharp. "He's useless now. He can't even move without help. If the doctors are wrong and he lasts longer than expected, I'll find another way. Don't worry. I'll handle it." Ethan's hand tightened on the armrest, his jaw clenching. His fiancée was planning his death. The next morning, as Vanessa strutted out of the house in heels, Lily came in with breakfast. She noticed the untouched food from the night before and frowned. "You didn't eat again?" she asked gently. Ethan forced a smile, hiding the storm in his chest. "Not hungry." She set the tray down and adjusted his blanket, her fingers brushing lightly against his hand. He felt more alive in that small touch than he had in all of Vanessa's kisses. Something dangerous and beautiful was awakening between them. But the walls had ears and secrets have ways of exploding. As days stretched on, Ethan began testing Lily in small ways. Asking her to read to him from old journals. Asking her to sit and talk about her dreams. She confessed she wanted to go back to school someday to study nursing, but money had always been the problem. Ethan listened, storing her words in his heart. He wondered if she could ever see beyond the billionaire, beyond the wheelchair, beyond the lies he was weaving. Because the truth was becoming harder and harder to hide. His body was healing faster than the doctors expected. Late at night, when no one was watching, Ethan could feel strength creeping back into his legs. He stood for seconds at a time, gripping the dresser, sweating with the effort before collapsing back into the chair. But no one could know. Not yet. And so, the mansion became a stage. Vanessa played the grieving fiancée in public while plotting in private. Lily played the quiet maid, not knowing her kindness was cracking open a billionaire's guarded heart. And Ethan played the role of the broken man, paralyzed not by injury but by the weight of betrayal. Each day the tension grew, twisting tighter like a rope about to snap. Until one night, Ethan caught Vanessa standing over him in the dark, her silhouette outlined by the dim lamp. In her hand was a small vial. Her whisper sliced the air. "This will make it easier. One drop in his drink and no one will ask questions." Ethan's eyes snapped open, his breath caught in his throat. She didn't know he was awake. And in that chilling moment, he realized the woman he once loved had truly become his enemy. The story of Ethan Cole had just begun. Betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact. And somewhere between the greed of Vanessa and the kindness of Lily, a choice, and a miracle, was waiting to unfold. Ethan's heart pounded so hard in his chest that he thought the sound might give him away. His eyelids, heavy with pretense, remained barely open as he watched Vanessa tilt the vial toward the glass of water on the nightstand. Her hand trembled slightly, but not from hesitation, only from eagerness to be done with the waiting. He could hear the faintest plink as one drop fell into the glass. Then another. Each one felt like the ticking of a clock that marked the end of his life. She whispered into the dark, "Finally, this nightmare will be over. I'll be free." She smiled, a thin, cruel smile, before quietly slipping the vial back into her purse and leaving the room. Ethan didn't move until he heard her heels click down the hallway and the slam of the front door. His palms were sweating. His throat ached with fear. He stared at the glass, the clear liquid that looked no different from any other, but he knew now, Vanessa had crossed the line. She wanted him dead. For minutes he just sat there in the dim light, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Then slowly he reached out his hand and gripped the arms of his wheelchair. Pain shot through his legs as he shifted, but he ignored it. He planted one bare foot on the floor, then the other, every nerve screaming as he forced himself to stand. He trembled, sweat dripping down his temples, but he managed to hold himself upright. For a moment he felt alive again. Alive not only because he could stand but because he now had proof. He had the evidence he needed. He staggered to the dresser, grabbed his phone, and snapped a photo of the glass, zooming in on the faint shimmer that didn't belong. Then he collapsed back into the chair, gasping just as Lily's knock came at the door. "Sir? Are you awake?" "It's Lily." Her voice was soft, cautious, like she was always afraid of disturbing his peace. Ethan quickly pulled the blanket over his legs again and straightened himself, hiding the truth. "Come in," he said, forcing a weak tone. The maid entered, wearing her usual pale blue uniform, her braids pulled back neatly. She carried a tray with steaming tea. Her eyes, bright but always filled with quiet worry, flicked toward the untouched dinner still sitting by the window. "You didn't eat again?" she whispered, almost to herself. Ethan gave a faint smile. "Wasn't hungry." She frowned, setting down the tea. Her gaze drifted toward the water glass. She reached for it instinctively. "At least drink something." Ethan's heart leapt. "No," he snapped louder than he meant to. Lily froze, startled. I mean," Ethan said, softening his voice, "I'm not thirsty right now." She tilted her head, confused, but didn't press further. She carried the glass to the table by the window instead, away from him, and returned to adjust his blanket. That small act, moving the glass out of reach, made Ethan's chest ache. She didn't know she had just saved his life a second time. He studied her face, the way her lips pressed in quiet determination, the way her eyes held no greed, no secrets. Just honesty. When she left the room, Ethan exhaled a shaky breath. He knew now that Lily wasn't just a maid, she was the reason he was still alive. The days that followed twisted tighter and tighter. Vanessa's visits grew less gentle, more impatient. She demanded answers about his will, snapping when Ethan delayed the topic. "Why are you dragging this out?" she spat one afternoon, standing in his study in a red silk blouse and gold earrings that shimmered under the chandelier. "Do you think you're going to live forever in that chair? What happens when you're gone? Do you even care about me?" Ethan's eyes narrowed, but he kept up the act of frailty. "I care," he murmured. "But I need time." She rolled her eyes. "Time is something you don't have, Ethan. Don't forget that." She stormed out, her perfume lingering in the air like poison. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He replayed her words, her tone, the venom in her voice. He reached for his phone again and began recording himself. He described what happened with the vial. He described her words. He spoke everything into evidence. His plan was forming slowly, a plan that would test her one last time and reveal her for who she truly was. But as he plotted, his thoughts drifted toward Lily. He remembered her laughter, small and genuine, when he once asked about her favorite childhood memory. She had told him about chasing fireflies in her village, barefoot, her mother clapping from the porch as she and her siblings ran across the field. That story stayed with him, glowing in the back of his mind. It was strange, he thought, how the warmth of a maid's memory could outshine the coldness of a fiancé's ambition. The next morning, Ethan asked Lily to sit with him longer than usual. She looked surprised, glancing at the clock, then at him. "I don't want to keep you from your work," she said, always careful. "Stay," Ethan insisted. "Please." She obeyed, sitting on the chair across from him. For the first time he spoke of his fears, not about Vanessa, not yet, but about life. About what it meant to feel weak, about what it meant to lose control. Lily listened, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes never leaving his face. When he paused, she leaned forward slightly. "Sometimes we think strength means never falling," she said softly. "But real strength is getting up again even when it hurts." Her words sank into him, deeper than any boardroom speech or business success ever had. But just as his bond with Lily deepened, Vanessa's mask cracked wider. One evening, Ethan overheard her arguing with someone on the phone again. "I can't wait anymore," she hissed, pacing in the hallway outside his room. "The money is tied up until his lawyer sees proof. I don't care. Find another way. Do it soon." Ethan gripped the arm of his chair, fury burning in his veins. She wasn't just planning, she was desperate. That made her dangerous. He knew then he couldn't just wait. He had to act. But he also couldn't expose his secret too soon. Not without catching her red-handed. The next day he called Vanessa into his study. She arrived dressed in white silk, a picture of elegance, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Ethan leaned back in his wheelchair, pretending to be weaker than usual. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "I've been thinking. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should finalize the will." Her eyes sparkled with greed. She leaned forward quickly, her voice almost too eager. "That's a wise choice, Ethan. You need to think about the future." Ethan gave a slow nod. "Tomorrow. Meet me here tomorrow night and I'll sign everything." Her face lit up like a woman who had just won the lottery. She kissed his cheek and left the room humming, already planning her victory. Ethan, however, had a different plan. That night he called his lawyer and his most trusted bodyguard. He didn't tell them everything, only enough to prepare. "Be in the house tomorrow night," he instructed. "Silent, unseen, and ready." They agreed without question. Ethan hung up the phone and sat in silence, staring at the city lights outside his window. His heart raced not from fear of Vanessa but from what lay ahead. Tomorrow night would change everything. But as the hours passed, something unexpected happened. Lily entered with his evening tea, humming softly as usual. She set the tray down and noticed the tension in his face. "You look worried," she said gently. He hesitated. He wanted to tell her the truth, to unburden everything. But instead he forced a smile. "Just tired." She tilted her head, studying him. "Sometimes we hide too much," she whispered. "Sometimes it's better to let someone help." She turned to leave, but Ethan reached out suddenly and caught her wrist. His hand was warm, trembling. She looked down at him, eyes wide. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then slowly, Ethan released her, his throat tight with words he couldn't say. She left quietly, but her presence lingered like light after a storm. The next evening arrived, heavy with silence. The mansion glowed under golden chandeliers, the air thick with perfume and tension. Vanessa swept into the study wearing a black dress that clung to her like ambition itself. She carried her purse, her eyes shining with hunger. "Are you ready, darling?" she purred. Ethan nodded weakly from his chair. "The papers are in the drawer," he murmured. She moved toward the desk, her heels echoing on the marble floor. What she didn't know was that behind the curtains, the lawyer and bodyguard waited. Ethan's phone recorded everything, tucked into his lap. Vanessa pulled out the drawer and froze. Instead of papers, she saw a small empty vial, the very vial she thought she had hidden away. Her face went pale. She turned slowly toward Ethan, her lips parting in shock. How did you?" she stammered. Ethan's eyes locked onto hers, sharper than she had ever seen them. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low, steady and deadly calm. "I know what you've been planning, Vanessa. Every word. Every drop. And tonight, the truth comes out." Before she could respond, the lawyer stepped forward from the shadows, the bodyguard behind him. Vanessa gasped, her face draining of color. The trap had been set. The game was over. But just as Ethan thought he had her cornered, Vanessa did something he never expected. She lunged toward the nightstand, grabbed the poison glass still resting there and screamed, "If I go down, you're going down with me." She raised it high above his head, ready to smash it into his face. And that was the moment the door burst open. Lily stood there, her hands flying to her mouth as she saw the scene. Vanessa frozen mid-swing, Ethan in his chair, the others rushing forward. Time seemed to stop. Ethan's heart pounded louder than ever. He had been ready for betrayal, ready for evidence, ready for justice. But he wasn't ready for Lily to be caught in the middle of it all. The glass trembled in Vanessa's grip. The bodyguard lunged. Lily screamed. And Ethan, for the first time in months, felt his legs surge with strength as he pushed against the chair, desperate to rise. And in that electrifying moment, everything hung in the balance. The sound of shattering glass rang through the mansion like a gunshot. Vanessa's hand had slipped in the struggle, and the poisoned water spilled across the polished floor, droplets glinting under the chandelier. For a split second, chaos froze in midair. Ethan half rising from his chair, Vanessa's face twisted in rage, Lily by the door with her hands pressed against her chest, and the bodyguard lunging forward with outstretched arms. Then everything exploded at once. Vanessa screamed, thrashing as the bodyguard grabbed her wrist, twisting the glass from her grip. Lily darted forward, almost without thinking, pulling Ethan back as though she could shield him with her small frame. Ethan felt her touch and something inside him blazed awake. His legs trembled beneath him, the muscles screaming, but this time he didn't care. He pushed harder, gripping the side of his chair, and for the first time since the crash he stood tall in full view of everyone. Gasps filled the room. Vanessa's eyes widened, horror spreading across her face. You can stand?" she choked, struggling in the bodyguard's grip. Ethan's chest heaved as he planted his weight firmly on both feet. His legs shook but held. He stepped forward one then another until he towered over her. The room was silent except for his breathing. His voice when it came was low and steady. "Yes, Vanessa. I can stand. And I can finally see you for who you really are." The lawyer pulled out his phone, recording the scene as Vanessa fought against the bodyguard, her once perfect poise crumbling into desperation. "You lied to me," she screamed. "You tricked me." Ethan's eyes burned into hers. "I pretended to be weak," he said coldly, "and you showed me the truth of your heart. You didn't love me. You loved my money. You wanted my death." His words cut sharper than any blade, and Vanessa sagged in defeat, her face wet with sweat and smeared makeup. Lily stood frozen by the desk, her wide eyes locked on Ethan, awe and fear swirling inside them. She had seen him rise, seen the truth he had hidden from the world. The police were called that night. Vanessa was dragged away, hurling curses as she was shoved into the back of a squad car. Reporters gathered outside the mansion gates, cameras flashing, hungry for the story of betrayal and secret recovery. But inside the mansion, silence settled again. Ethan dismissed his lawyer and the bodyguard, thanking them with firm nods. Then only Lily remained, standing awkwardly in the study doorway, unsure whether she should leave. Ethan turned to her, his body trembling from exhaustion. He leaned against the desk for support, his legs weak but his spirit stronger than ever. He whispered almost to himself, "I didn't want you to see me like this. Not like a liar." Lily shook her head slowly, stepping forward. Her voice was soft but firm. "You weren't lying, sir. You were protecting yourself. Sometimes survival means pretending." Ethan looked at her, his throat tightening. 4 months he had been surrounded by greed, masks and betrayal. But here stood Lily, a maid with nothing to gain, and her words carried more truth than all the people he had once called family. He lowered his gaze. "I thought money could buy love. I thought status could secure loyalty. But you've shown me something different." His voice cracked slightly. "You cared for me when I had nothing to give." Lily's lips parted, her expression unreadable. For a long moment they simply looked at each other. The billionaire and the maid, two souls from different worlds, standing in the ruins of a love built on lies. Ethan wanted to say more, but his body betrayed him. His legs gave out and he crumpled back into the chair. Lily rushed forward instinctively, kneeling beside him, her hand gripping his arm with surprising strength. "You need rest," she said firmly. "You're still healing. Don't push yourself too hard." Her closeness filled Ethan with warmth. He nodded, closing his eyes, allowing himself to lean on her. For the first time in a long time he felt safe. The days after Vanessa's arrest were a blur of headlines, lawyers, and boardroom whispers. Ethan's empire shook with the scandal, but his steady presence kept it standing. Rumors spread quickly. The billionaire had faked paralysis, his fiancée had betrayed him, and justice had prevailed. Some called him cruel for pretending, others praised his brilliance. But Ethan didn't care what the world thought. His focus was on something far more important. At night, when the mansion grew quiet, he found himself waiting for Lily's soft footsteps in the hallway, the gentle knock as she brought his tea, the quiet presence that eased his storm. One evening, as she set the tray down, he asked her a question that had been burning in his chest. "Lily, why do you stay? You've seen the worst of me, the lies, the pain, the weakness. You could find work anywhere else. Why here?" She looked at him, her brown eyes steady. "Because, sir," she said softly, "sometimes people need someone to see them, not their money, not their power, just them. And maybe I was meant to be that person for you." Her words broke something open inside Ethan, something he had locked away for years. He reached out, covering her hand with his. His touch lingered, trembling with emotions he hadn't dared to feel. But just as hope began to bloom, new storms gathered on the horizon. Vanessa's family, humiliated and furious, began filing lawsuits, claiming Ethan had ruined her reputation, that his games had driven her to madness. Reporters camped outside the mansion, spinning every story they could. The board of directors whispered about trust, about whether Ethan's judgment was sound. The world didn't forgive easily, and Ethan's empire stood at risk. Through it all, Lily remained. She shielded him from gossip, comforted him when his anger threatened to boil over, and reminded him to eat when stress stole his appetite. She became more than a maid, she became his anchor. One night, after a brutal meeting where his own board questioned his decisions, Ethan found her in the kitchen washing dishes. He stepped into the doorway silently, watching her hum to herself as soap bubbles clung to her fingers. The sight calmed him in a way nothing else could. He crossed the room slowly, and without a word, he took the towel from her hands. She looked at him, startled. He smiled faintly. "Let me dry," he whispered. "For once, let me do something for you." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Billionaires don't dry dishes." He leaned closer. "Maybe this one does." The air between them grew heavy, charged with unspoken feelings. Lily lowered her gaze, her cheeks flushed. Ethan's hand brushed against hers, and for a moment, the world fell away. He wanted to tell her everything, that she had saved him, that her kindness had healed wounds deeper than his broken body, that he was falling for her. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he simply whispered, "Thank you." She looked up, her eyes shimmering, and in that moment, both knew something had shifted. As weeks passed, Ethan grew stronger. Therapy sessions gave him more control over his legs, and soon he could walk short distances with a cane. His recovery was a miracle to the public, but he knew the true miracle wasn't in his body, it was in his heart. He had learned what betrayal looked like, and he had learned what real love might feel like. And now, every glance at Lily reminded him of the choice before him. Return to the world of wealth and shallow relationships, or step into something real, something pure. One evening, he stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the lights of Lagos twinkling like scattered stars. Lily joined him quietly, her hands clasped in front of her. He turned to her, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Lily, when I was in that chair, I thought my life was over. But then you came. You showed me care without expecting anything in return. You reminded me what it means to be human." He took a deep breath. "I don't know where this will lead, but I know one thing, I don't want to face the future without you." Her breath caught, her eyes wide. For a moment, silence hung between them, the city humming below. Then slowly Lily smiled, small and uncertain but filled with light. "Maybe the future is kinder than we think," she whispered. Ethan reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. But just as his heart soared, the phone in his pocket buzzed. He pulled it out, his expression darkening as he read the message. It was from his lawyer. "Vanessa's family has filed a criminal countersuit. They're coming after everything. Be ready." Ethan's jaw tightened, his grip on Lily's hand firm. The battle wasn't over. Love had bloomed, but enemies were gathering. And the fight for his empire, his freedom, and his heart was only beginning. Before we continue this gripping story, do one thing for me. Hit that subscribe button right now to support our growth. Comment your city below so I know where you're watching from. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next, because Ethan's greatest test is yet to come, and the poor maid who stole his heart may be the only one who can save him. The rain poured heavily over Lagos that night, streaking the glass walls of Ethan's mansion like silver threads. Thunder rolled in the distance, and lightning illuminated the dark clouds, making the city look like a battlefield. Inside, Ethan sat in his study, his cane resting by his side, his jaw clenched as he stared at the documents laid out before him. Vanessa's family had filed their countersuit, accusing him of cruelty, manipulation, and mental abuse. They claimed his act of pretending to be paralyzed had pushed Vanessa into desperation, and that she was the real victim. It was a twisted lie, but the kind of lie powerful lawyers knew how to dress up and sell to the world. The media had already picked it up, headlines screaming, "Billionaire fake disability, fiancé driven to madness?" Ethan's empire trembled again, and the board's faith in him began to fracture. The weight of betrayal pressed down on him heavier than before. He had exposed Vanessa, yet the scars of her schemes still bled into his life. For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly weary, not from business, not from injury, but from the war of hearts and trust. He closed his eyes and leaned back, running a hand across his face. That was when Lily entered quietly, holding a tray of warm tea, her braids glistening from the rain outside. She set it down gently, her presence softening the storm in his chest. "You didn't eat dinner," she said in her calm, steady voice. "I thought this might help." Ethan opened his eyes and looked at her, really looked at her. She was the only constant since the accident, the only person who had stood beside him without asking for anything. Her simple uniform, the faint scent of soap, her eyes that carried no greed, they were a reminder of everything real. He reached for the cup, their fingers brushing for a brief second. "You always seem to know what I need," he murmured. Lily smiled faintly, lowering her gaze. "Sometimes it's not about knowing, sir. It's about caring enough to notice." Her words struck deep. Ethan realized he had spent his whole life surrounded by people who noticed only his wealth, his influence, his power. Lily noticed him. And yet, even as warmth spread through his chest, the shadow of the lawsuit loomed. He knew he couldn't keep her safe from what was coming. His enemies were circling, and anyone close to him would be dragged into the storm. He wanted to tell her to leave, to go back to her quiet life before his world swallowed her whole. But when he looked at her, standing firm despite the chaos, he couldn't bring himself to push her away. The next morning, the war truly began. The courtroom was packed with reporters, flashing cameras, and murmuring spectators. Vanessa's family sat at one side, their lawyers dressed in black suits, their faces carved with indignation. On the other side, Ethan sat tall in a charcoal suit, his cane resting against the table, his lawyer by his side. The world watched the billionaire who had once pretended to be broken now fighting to prove his innocence. Vanessa herself wasn't present. She was locked in a holding cell awaiting her trial, but her absence made her family's anger burn hotter. The prosecutor rose, his voice sharp. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to expose a cruel deception. My clients believe Mr. Cole manipulated their daughter, staging a false disability that inflicted emotional torture. This was not a test of love, it was an act of psychological abuse." Gasps rippled through the room. Ethan sat motionless, his hands folded, his expression unreadable. But inside his fury burned. He wanted to stand and shout the truth, to reveal the vial, the recordings, the nights of whispered murder plots. But his lawyer squeezed his arm gently, signaling patience. When it was the defense's turn, Ethan's lawyer rose calmly. "The truth is simple," he said, his voice steady. "Mr. Cole's actions were not meant to harm but to reveal. And what he revealed was a plot against his life. We have evidence, recordings, and witnesses that show Ms. Brooks did not intend to love or care for him, but to end him. If anyone here was a victim, it was Mr. Cole." He pressed a button, and the courtroom filled with the sound of Vanessa's recorded voice. "If the doctors are wrong and he lasts longer than expected, I'll find another way. Don't worry. I'll handle it." Murmurs erupted. The judge banged the gavel for silence. Ethan's jaw tightened as he heard those words again, but relief washed over him. The truth was finally breaking through the lies. Over the following days, the trial became a spectacle. Every newspaper, every TV station, every online blog carried the story. Some sided with Vanessa's family, calling Ethan manipulative. Others hailed him as brilliant for exposing a gold digger. His empire teetered like a skyscraper in the wind, but through it all, Lily remained his anchor. She sat in the back of the courtroom each day, quiet and unnoticed, but her presence filled Ethan with strength. Each time he caught her eyes, he felt steadier, more certain of his fight. One night, after a long day in court, Ethan returned home drained. He found Lily waiting in the kitchen, wiping down counters. She looked up, concern flickering in her eyes. "You shouldn't carry all of this alone," she said softly. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "The world is tearing me apart, Lily. They want to make me the villain. And maybe they're right. Maybe I shouldn't have pretended." Lily walked over and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You pretended because you wanted to know the truth. And the truth saved your life. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." He looked up at her, his heart aching with gratitude and something deeper, something unspoken. Weeks passed and slowly the tide began to turn. More evidence surfaced. Bank transfers from Vanessa to hired men, secret meetings caught on camera, testimonies from staff who had overheard her plotting. Piece by piece, her family's case crumbled. The judge leaned toward Ethan's lawyer during the final day of arguments, his face stern but thoughtful. "This court does not exist to punish a man for testing loyalty," he said. "It exists to protect life, and Mr. Cole's life was clearly in danger." With the slam of the gavel, Vanessa's family's case was dismissed. The crowd erupted with whispers, cameras flashing wildly. Ethan sat still, his chest rising with a deep breath, relief flooding him. Across the room, Lily's smile was small but radiant, her eyes shimmering with pride. In that moment, Ethan realized the storm had passed. Not only had he saved his empire, but he had also discovered the rarest treasure, a love that had no price tag. That night, back at the mansion, Ethan found Lily standing by the balcony, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. He walked toward her slowly, leaning on his cane, each step steady and purposeful. She turned as he approached, her expression calm but searching. He stopped in front of her, his heart pounding. "Lily," he said softly, "I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who wanted what I had, not who I was. You're the only one who saw me when I was broken. The only one who cared when I had nothing to give. I don't want to pretend anymore. Not with you." Her breath caught, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. "Sir," she whispered, unsure. He stepped closer, his voice trembling but true. "Don't call me sir. Call me Ethan. And let me call you what you truly are, the woman who saved me." For a long, quiet moment, the world held its breath. Then Lily's lips curved into the softest smile, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Ethan," she whispered. The rain outside slowed to a gentle drizzle, the storm giving way to calm. Ethan reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined, simple and sure. In that moment, it didn't matter that he was a billionaire and she was a maid. What mattered was the truth, that love had found him in the unlikeliest of places, and it was worth more than every fortune he owned. As they stood together on the balcony, the city humming below, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. The battles weren't over. The world would still question, still pry, still demand. But with Lily beside him, he knew he could face anything. And this is only the beginning of their journey. Because when love is real, no storm can destroy it, no betrayal can bury it, and no amount of wealth can buy it. If you've been moved by this story, pause for a moment, smash that subscribe button right now to support our growth. Comment your city below because I want to know where you're watching from. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Because sometimes the greatest love stories are born not in palaces, but in the quiet hearts that choose kindness over greed.